I need to let us know a couple things are going to happen. One, we've been going through this. That's way too high for me. There we go. To be self-aware, to be wise. Still not perfect. That's okay. We're going to not pay attention to that. The way of the wise, the very title of this sermon series is an attempt to get wisdom out of purely logical spaces. I think our culture is inclined to tell us that wisdom is something that belongs to somebody who has a lot of experiences. One writer, several of us are fond of, says that experiences teach us nothing. How many people do you know that have experienced a lot of things and you would say they're not very wise? In fact, maybe they experienced so many things because they failed to gain wisdom. Experiences are not wisdom. That does not mean that, therefore, age always brings wisdom. It does not mean then that knowledge brings wisdom. What brings wisdom? Wisdom is a way. Wisdom is a way of being. Wisdom is gained through verbs. Wisdom is gained through action. Wisdom is gained through intentionally pursuing wisdom. One of my favorite proverbs is, first do this, gain wisdom. So, well, what's the rest of the book about, right? Thank you, yeah, but to gain wisdom, do this, gain wisdom. It is its own self-fulfilling activity. You must gain wisdom. Because of that, the very first thing we talked about in the sermon series is that wisdom is relational. Wisdom is relational for two main reasons. One, the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. The beginning of wisdom is fear of the Lord. One cannot gain wisdom unless one is on the way that fears God. Without God, without the relationship to God, there is no such thing as a human being gaining wisdom. It's just not possible. But the other way in which wisdom is relational is that we are all human beings living in a certain time and place, living in a context, and we are capable of gaining wisdom. But the only way to really gain wisdom is to live it. Wisdom is gained through the relationship of our lives, through our relating our experiences to other things and looking for God in those experiences. And so, this sermon series is especially set up well to invite some of you to share testimonies of how wisdom has played out in your lives. And so today is the first day that we'll have one of our fellow Northsiders come and share a testimony related to this proverb. And so Judy Bittick is going to, after the sermon, share her testimony of how Proverbs 19 has played out in her life. We'll have another week where it's just me, next week. And then after that, we'll have our friends Greg Thorne, and then the next week Rachel Starr, and then Rashid Jones all share testimonies of how these different proverbs, these different wisdom sayings have played out in their lives. So ahead of time, thank you to all four of you for your willingness to be vulnerable and to share with us the ways in which you have experienced the way of the wise in your own life. Looking forward to what Judy is going to share with us today. This text is odd. Like many proverbs, it starts with something that might seem like really easy and simple, and maybe even like obvious in a dumb way. Many are the plans of man, but it is the Lord's purpose, the purpose of the Lord that will be established. The New Revised Standard Version, which is normally a version I like quite a bit, says not the heart, does not say the heart of people devise plans, but it says the mind of human beings devise plans. Where do you make your plans? Where in your body do plans originate? The NRSV says that your mind is the generator of plans. That is a translation. There are Hebrew words that we're not real sure. I mean, we're mostly sure what they mean, but they can mean like weirdly different things. The word here in this proverb is the word for heart, the organ in the center of your body and slightly to the left that pumps blood. That's the word. It says in the Hebrew mind that the plans of people originate in one's heart. So why is it that all these different translations, the NRSV including one of them, why is it that they all say, well, it's the mind where human beings make their plans? Part of that is just the way language works. There's this movie I watched recently. I've been meaning to watch it for a long time. It's a pretty good movie. It's called Arrival, and it's about aliens arriving on this planet. Stay with me. The problem of this movie is not that the aliens want to hurt humanity. The problem of this movie is that aliens want to communicate with humanity. Have we ever thought about how we would do that? How we would try to learn each other's language? I'm not going to give any spoilers. Although I think like the movie, if it's 20 years old or older, like that's on you if I spoil it at that point, right? There should be a rule. No spoilers, but the aliens communicate not in an auditory language, but in a visual language. They show this human linguist, played by Amy Adams, they show her different circles. These circles have different meanings. And for a brief moment in the movie, they talk about something that is so fascinating to me. It's called the Sapir-Whorf theory. The Sapir-Whorf theory is not an agreed-upon scientific thing, okay? I'm not going to mislead you. It is plausible, but not necessarily agreed upon, and it is also sometimes called linguistic relativism or linguistic determinism. Those are big words that just mean the language you learn is going to influence your worldview. The language you learn is going to influence your worldview. And so, if you grow up your whole life hearing that human beings devise plans in their heads, you might see the world in a more logical, oriented way than if you grew up in a culture that talks about plans originating in someone's heart, where you might understand the world as a place that is determined by our emotions, by passions. And let me do you even one better. What if heart doesn't mean the same thing in different languages? Which is the case here. We talked last week about how Hebrew, in the Hebrew language, they don't necessarily think about the heart as only an emotional thing, but the heart as the core of who someone is. I think what we're being asked to do in understanding Proverbs 19 is to shift our worldview ever so slightly so that we can understand the wisdom of God here from this one culture. The heart is not just a thing that feels things. It is a thing that feels things. But in the Hebrew mindset, the heart is the thing that because it feels things, it then begins to think things. It then begins to make plans, not based on logic, but based on what I feel most deeply. Our very tradition, the Stone Campbell movement, the Restoration movement, the movement that originated in the United States at the turn in the 1700s, the 1800s, comes from another school of reason. It comes from the Scottish school of reason. This is not going to turn into a huge history lesson. Stay with me. But Thomas and Alexander Campbell, two of the most important founders of this movement, are schooled in what is called the Scottish School of Rationalism, which believes, basically, that you can think your way to a better life, that you can reason your way to a better life, that human beings can organize if we just agree on what's reasonable. If we can just get to a common understanding of the facts, then we can pattern our lives, and human beings will relate better to each other, and things will basically go better. Can't we just reason? And this reminds me of one of my favorite scenes from a classic movie from 2001, Meet the Parents. Meet the Parents is about a young man named Greg, just Greg, and Greg is meeting his girlfriend's parents in a beautiful New England town, and she doesn't even know this, but he's going to propose to her that weekend, and he's very nervous about it. And what he also doesn't know is that his girlfriend's father is a secret former CIA agent who is about to grill him. And Greg pulls up to the car, pulls the rental car up to the house, and his girlfriend gets out, and they hug each other, and he's kind of awkwardly standing by the car, not really knowing what to do. And he finally goes up and introduces himself to her father, and her father says, "Interesting car, Greg." And he says, "Thanks, the rental company just gave it to me." And he says, "It's green." He said, "Yeah. They say geniuses pick green." He goes, "Oh, well, thanks." And then he says, "But she didn't pick it." It's awkward. If you're feeling awkward right now, that's the desired emotion. How would you pick a color of a car? If you could buy a brand new car, what color would you pick? How would you make the most irrelevant of plans? You would probably, right, like, because we're rational people, we would go and look at the statistics of how often a red car is pulled over by police officers, which is higher than a gray car. You might look at, maybe, there was this movie once where they say geniuses pick green, and I would really like people to think that I'm a genius, so I'm going to pick a green car. And you could come up with all of these. You could come up with spreadsheets for how to pick the color of a car. And do you know what you would be doing? You would be rationalizing your emotions. Because if you trail any one of those decision-making things, you get down to what is underneath our rationalism, which is always our feelings, our fears, our hopes, our dreams. They are not rooted in our ability to rationalize the world. They are rooted in our ability to experience the world through our heart. And then the rationalism comes later. Why did you pick red? It made me feel excited. Why did you pick green? I wanted people to think I'm smarter than I am. Why did you pick gray? It was reasonable. It's a reasonable person's color. Well, you want people to think you're reasonable. Our emotions are, I think, how we experience the world primarily. It's just that we live in a culture that uses language of the head first. And so when we get an Old Testament text, a Hebrew text that comes to us and uses the word heart in connection to plans, we've got to change the word heart. It's uncomfortable. We don't like it. But the word, my friends, the word is heart. You can get reasonable, rational people. You can get them together, and they can agree that they are going to agree on a tricky issue based on reason and rationalism, and they can have the exact same life experience. And when it comes time to make a decision, guess what? They're not going to always agree. Because living your life through rationalism, living your life based on reason alone, is irrational. It doesn't work. It is a promise that we have bought into that has disappointed us over and over and over again. I like thinking things through. I like spreadsheets. They make me feel comfortable. They make me think that these complex problems we deal with have some sort of order to them. And sometimes there is order in life. Sometimes there is, but it is something we are staking ourselves to that will one day run out because we don't primarily experience the world through our heads. We experience the world through our hearts, and then we make sense of it. So where do your plans for your life originate? I'm thinking about the families of those girls. You know, they sent their kids to a camp. It's got a great reputation. Camp that keeps kids safe and does all the things to keep kids safe that you're supposed to do. They made so many good plans, and good for them. But I'm thinking about their parents right now who are probably trying to make reason out of the most impossible situation a person can experience. They don't even know where they are. How do we experience that? Rationalism? Are you serious? No. No, the only way to experience that, the only honest way to experience that sort of pain is to just be with someone in that pain. That our heart be open to the hearts of those who are grieving. Because often life doesn't make sense. Often it just doesn't make any sense. Awful things just sometimes happen. And you can blame God, or you can excuse God, but that is all trying to make sense out of something that doesn't make sense. It is okay every once in a while to just say, I'm going to turn my rational brain off because it has never promised to make us whole. Our hearts make plans. Our hearts make plans, and then our rational brains put language around what our hearts experience. The NIV says, many are the plans of a person's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails. I need to talk about one more language thing. We have all these different contractions, right? We have all these different ways of connecting thoughts in sentences. We can say and we can say but. And means the thought is going to continue, and but means it's going to be something different. The Hebrew language doesn't have that. It just has a V. Va. And you're just supposed to tell from context if it's a but or an and this is why Hebrew class was very difficult for me, I'll be honest. We don't know if Proverbs 19 is changing the thought or continuing the thought. There's no way of really knowing that. And the Hebrew mind, their way of seeing the world would be that doesn't really matter. Is it a different thought or is it a new thought? And so let me read to you from the New King James Version, which I think, though a fairly wooden translation, gets it pretty close to being right. There are so many devices in a human heart. Nevertheless, the counsel of the Lord is the one that shall stand. I don't think that God is contradicting our plans all the time. There's a way to read this. There's actually a saying now that is far out of date, but for a long, long time, all the way back to the Greeks and the Romans, all the way up to probably about the 18th century, people would say, man proposes, but God disposes. This is kind of almost flippant way of saying, you can make plans if you want, God's going to shred them up. I don't think that's right. I don't think that's who God is. I don't think that's what the Proverbs is saying. I think it is saying that it is human to make plans in your heart. Of course, we have desires for our children. Of course, we make plans for the future. Of course, we then go and put language around it. It's just normal. It's normal to make plans. Can you imagine a life where we didn't make plans? Nevertheless, God's plans will always come to fruition. It is not a but, it is not an and, it is at the same time. So what do we do? Our job is to try to let go of our heart's plans, to hold them lightly, to keep our heart open and seeking the plans of God, that our heart might begin to beat with God's. Let me take a risk here today and speak what I think is happening in God's heart. I think God's heart is broken today. I think God's heart is broken for the parents who are wondering where their children are. That seems consistent with the heart of God that I read in Scripture. Maybe our job is today to not put logic around something that is unexplainable like a flash flood. Maybe our job is to have soft enough hearts that they can break with God's heart and just sit there. To just sit in the heartbreak of today. That's okay. That is wise. I want us to close. I'm going to tell you it and then I'm going to pray it. I want us to close with the ending of a prayer that the recovery community uses quite often. It's from a theologian named Reinhold Niebuhr. It's often called the Serenity Prayer. I'm going to tell you the words, and then I'm going to ask us to sit in a moment of quiet, and I will close us with that prayer. It says this: "Let me accept hardships as the pathway to peace, taking this world not as I would have it, but as it is. Let me trust that all will be made right if I will but submit to your will." That's a lot of trust. That's a lot of letting go. But it strikes me as profoundly wise. Church, let's pray. Father, there are so many things that we bring to worship today. Sometimes it is just the living that is so hard. And we rush to make sense out of it. And God, you have grace on us and mercy on us when we rush to put language on that which is not describable. And so, God, full of faith, full of imperfect faith, we take all of the things that are on our hearts. We open our hearts to you, and we say, let us accept hardships as the pathway to peace, taking this world as it is and not as we would have it. Let us trust that all will be made right if we will but submit to your will.
I know some of you have heard parts of my life story before, so I debated whether to share part of them again or not. And then I decided, it's worth repeating how God works in our life, and the fact that we need to share our stories with the world, to be a witness to the world, to show the world that we have a God that's relevant today, that lives here and is working in our lives. Many are the plans of a man's heart. Many are the plans of a woman's heart. And I'm a planner. And so I like to make plans. And I really like things to go the way I planned. But second part says, but the Lord's purpose prevails. Well, that has been proven to me over and over again in my life. So to give you some context for my story, I was an engineer in the Air Force for over 28 years and now retired. But that meant we moved every couple of years. And so we moved around. We're used to that. And in theory, there's a dream sheet and you can put in your desires of where you would like to go. Doesn't always work, but you can at least express your wishes. So we're living in Tucson and I get an assignment to Iceland. And yes, that is a northern island, right? Cold. So once my husband got over the shock of, what, Iceland? I gave him the option. So Iceland's one of those unique places where I could have gone for 1 year by myself, or we could go 2 years as an entire family. And it took Dick 3 seconds to say, yeah, we're all going. So we're in Iceland, and that's considered a short tour, remote tour, which means I would have priority for the next assignment coming out of there. So I should have been able to go where I desired. Well, it didn't work that way. We got an assignment to Japan. And then to add insult to injury, I wasn't going as an engineer, I was going as a planner in the air operations world with a bunch of flyer guys that don't know what they're doing. So anyway, I fought that, right? I did not want to go there, and it wasn't right. It was not supposed to happen, but I lost. So we end up there as a family. Now my son, the oldest one, Evan, is 15 while we're there, and I got to tell you, that's really a hard year, I guess, for 15-year-old boys, but for their parents especially, because he was rebellious, and the more he rebelled, the more we tried to control him, and it didn't work, and it just was a vicious circle. And finally I was at wit's end, so I finally did what I should have done in the beginning and just handed it to God and said, I can't do this anymore. You are going to have to intervene. Well, it was either that exact day or the very next day that both our kids are at swim practice, at swim team, and Evan's swimming the 50-meter pool underwater, and he passes out underwater, and nobody sees him. Well, it just happens that another 15-year-old girl, who's also in youth group with him, named Jamie, said she just got this overwhelming feeling that she needed to find Evan. So she asked some kids, have you seen him? And they're like, I think he got out of the pool to go to the restroom. And she says, it did not feel right. So she got in the water and started looking for him, and she found him on the bottom of the pool up against a wall. And he was gone at that point. I mean, he'd stopped breathing, but his heart had stopped also. They pulled him out and did CPR and were able to revive him. And by the grace of God, I mean, he had no permanent damage and was revived. I got to tell you, God hit us over the head with a 2x4 that day. He changed our perspectives on life. I mean, it didn't make a 15-year-old boy perfect after that, but it changed how we viewed things and how we viewed life. In looking back on this, I can see how God used this experience to prepare Evan for his job. See, in Iceland, they had a rescue squadron there. So these are the people that go jump in the water, go climb mountains, jump out of airplanes to rescue people, to search for people and rescue them. So we got to see what that community does. And then when we were in Japan, where I did not want to be, but we were for 4 years, Evan worked as a lifeguard with some airmen that had not passed the program to become pararescue men. And so he found out from them what that training was really about, how to do it. Then Evan decides that's what he's going to be, as a pararescue man. And that's for him, at that time, it was a 3-year training program, and about 90% of the people that enter do not make it through the program. And most of them don't make it through the program because of the water part of it. They're afraid of drowning, and they do lots of different crazy exercises to teach you not to panic in water. Well, this prepared my son, because he looked back and said, oh, you know what? I've drowned before. I know what that's like, okay? And if that happens to me, they're going to pull me out of the water, and I get to sit on the side of the pool and watch everybody else still doing it, okay? So seeing how God didn't bless my plan, which was not to be at any of those places, but his purpose prevailed, he prepared my son to be a pararescue man, to be able to go into those hard situations. Their motto is that others might live. And there's been lots of times where we've seen how Evan has done that in different situations, but probably one of the most dramatic ones is, Evan got to, many years later, after training, be part of the rescue team that saved 13 lives of a soccer team that was trapped in a cave in Thailand. And so I look at this and go, God's will prevailed. He was preparing my son for a mission. And the hard part about that for me as the planner is, you know what? It's not always about me. Sometimes God messes up my plans for somebody else's purpose, to prepare someone else. And it's not always fun being used by God, but accept it. It's life. It happens. And so I can look back and see how God used this whole situation for his purpose. The problem is sometimes it truly is about me. So the end of 2021 and really the year of 2022 were really hard, difficult years for me. And I spent a lot of that time just sitting with the question, is it enough to be valued by God? You know, the mind knows it is, but the heart doesn't necessarily feel that way. And so I sat with that question for a while, and then God created this situation where I was part of a spiritual formation mentorship program in 2022, which was amazing. But I could look back and see how I needed to be in that place of brokenness to enter into that program, into a posture with humility, so that God could rebuild me and show me that the person he created me to be from birth and those experiences that I've had in life were necessary for me to be transformed more and more into the image of Christ. And so now, when I sit in those difficult situations, or I sit with other people that are going through difficult situations, I try to enter into this in a question of, what is it that God is teaching me in this time? And you know, it's not always obvious in that moment, in that hardship, and it might be that I can look back later and see how God has worked in that. And I'm confident that there'll be some things that I'm not going to see until we're in heaven and God makes everything clear. But I've learned to trust God. And it's not one thing that I do and it's just done. It's something I have to choose to do every day, especially on the hard days, is to trust God. So what I challenge myself and all of you is, go ahead and make your plans, but be in a posture to hear God calling you on a different route, and accept that and trust him.